Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I'm here with Alyse Maslonik. How are you, Alyse?
Good, I'm doing well. How are you, Angela?
I am doing so good. Thank you so much for asking. So I want to introduce Alyse to you because I think she's got a really fascinating story that you guys are going to really love. So Alyse began her life as a child of unfortunate circumstances. Through those tough experiences, she was determined to make the world a better place for others and used her desire to escape her surroundings as fuel to push others forward. At age 21, with a measly $63 in her name, she packed up everything she owned and set out on a journey to change her life. By the age of 23, she was managing a multi-million-dollar property asset in Charlotte, North Carolina. She went on to become one of the youngest sales and marketing representatives for a custom home builder in the Charlotte region, where she developed the love of helping people achieve their own piece of the American dream through home ownership. Alyse would go on to spend many years in corporate roles, consistently pushing back against the status quo to create change within systems of injustice and inequality. Reflecting on her journey from humble beginnings to success, she contemplated how to give back to children that needed the most. As a need-based scholarship recipient in her childhood, Alyse recognized the significance of her education had in her ability to stop the cycle of generational poverty. With fierce determination and a belief that she could make a difference in growing funding for financial and scholarships for underprivileged children, Alyse founded RedefinED LLC, a strategic development partner for non-public and private schools, and offers a wide array of services to help schools grow funding and enrollment. As CEO of RedefinED LLC, Alyse continues her lifelong mission through the Triumph Over Tragedy Scholarship Award, which provides additional scholarships to students that have demonstrated their ability to triumph over tragedy and who have remained resilient in the face of adversity. Very cool. I love that story so much. So tell me a little bit. So as you're growing up, did you foresee anything other than what you were in the cycle that you were in?
That's such a good question. From a very, very young age, I had a journal, and through all of the chaos, I would always write, This is not the story that God intended for me.
Wow.
I will break this cycle. Yeah, in fifth grade, I wrote that in my journal, and I remember always feeling like there is something else that's promised. If I can just make it through the darkness, there is beauty out there waiting for me. So it was odd that I had that at a young age, but I think a lot of it had to do with my grandma drug me to church all the time, and she would talk to me about those things. And so did my mom, even though we really struggled. She really instilled in us that, this isn't the end, and tough people last, tough times don't.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that wholeheartedly. So as you're struggling and you're a child, and, and this is the thing with, I actually studied child psychology in college, and it is so hard to break those cycles because as a child, all you know is your surroundings and what is shown to you, right? And so you don't start discovering the world until you really get out of your area. And that's tough to do as a child, especially if you don't have means to travel. So, when did you really start to kind of believe that something could be different, and you started to see it and make it happen for yourself?
Sure. So it is when I removed myself from my surroundings.
Yeah.
I had testified in a criminal trial against my stepfather, and it did not go well. And the next day I packed up everything that I owned. And I had met my biological grandfather that I never knew.
Wow.
And turns out he was a real estate guy down in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he had said to me, I see your story and I see that you're struggling. And every time you take a step forward, you get knocked back, 3 or 4. So he said, I won't give you a dime. but I will teach you what I know. So you can have a room to stay, but, and he's like, I know that's weird, but if you're willing, I'm willing. So after that, I packed up everything I owned. I only had $63 to my name, and I drove down to North Carolina, and very quickly, I, enrolled in real estate school. I had actually transferred my waitressing job from Pennsylvania to Charlotte, North Carolina. So I started work the next day.
Wow.
And as soon as I got into the real estate classes, I was only 2 of 21 that passed the course. And I realized, there are people in here that are much more accomplished than me and how I ever thought about myself. And here I was 1 of 2 that passed. So that's very quickly when I got some confidence of, maybe I can do it. And then I got a job, and then I got promoted. And the more that I kept going and these hurdles that I kept going over, my confidence just kept building. And I realized there's space for me in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I grew up in Pennsylvania as well. And one of the things that I had said to myself is, if I'm ever going to do anything with my life, I've got to leave this town. And, there are many people that I went to school with who have done just fine, but I knew I would never thrive there. And so for me, it was really just a change of environment for me altogether. And so I moved out of state, and I've never been, never gone back to live. I've gone back to visit, but that's about it. 5 days max.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I thought I would never move back, but my first love was from Pennsylvania when I was 15, and I moved back and married him. So that's the other reason I'm here.
That's awesome. Good for you. So, so how hard was it to testify against your stepdad?
It was really difficult. It created such a wedge in between my biological family and siblings, and it really showed me that there is so much work to do in the justice system.
Oh my gosh, you're not kidding.
It is really, really sad when you have to, as someone had been through what I was as a victim, and describe and have, defense attorneys that they're and call you as an 8-year-old that it was your fault, and those types of things. It's very eye-opening when you do go through something like that. But I always say that I knew that I was strong enough to withstand it. There was something in me at a young age that if it was going to happen to anyone, I needed it to happen to me, because I know that I'll make it through that storm. And I will take those lessons and ensure and do the work that I need to do to make sure that other kids don't have to experience it.
Absolutely. Well, good for you for taking all of your pain and all of your suffering and turn it into something that benefits others now, because I believe that as well, that when you can take that pain and use it as fuel for good, and not an excuse to go. And so many people do. They go through very tragic circumstances and they use it. You can either take you can go on one road, which is where you use that fuel and you create a passion to help others, or you can use it as an excuse to go become addicted to drugs and alcoholic and all of these things. And so you can take one or two paths, and it's really, there's nothing in between, because it changes who you are. It changes your persona. It changes the dynamic of how you interact in the world. And so I feel like it if you can choose that for good, if you can use that fuel for good, so much can happen in your life.
And that's so interesting that you say that, because I'm actually in the process of writing a memoir
on
my life. Yes. And the whole concept of it is called The Anger She Keeps. And it talks about how oftentimes in society, we really are told to be shameful of our anger, right? And that it's really bad. But I think that we do so many victims of trauma a disservice by saying that anger is bad and just get rid of it, because it's sometimes the anger that you feel is justified, and it burns so intensely that there is no way to get rid of it. So we need to have a better conversation with victims of real intense trauma that have that anger, that it is not a bad thing. It's not something that you have to try to numb out with drugs or alcohol, but it is something that you can use that is so powerful as fuel if you can transform it. So I want that conversation to be a lot different than what we do, because I spent so much of my life saying, no one likes an angry woman. No one likes an angry woman. But no one likes an angry woman until that woman takes that anger and transforms it into something beautiful.
That's exactly right. Absolutely. So when you're going through the real estate classes and you're really understanding that you're doing something potentially life-changing for yourself, where's your first opportunity out, your first job, your first opportunity? And were you terrified? Were you confident? How did you feel in that moment? Because this is out of your wheelhouse, right? This is out of what you've always known.
Yes, so that's such a good question too, because I was absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
I actually landed my first job as a leasing consultant for a property management company. The title sounds really great, but the pay wasn't.
Right.
And they had a base pay, and then they had like commission. So the better that you did, the more money that you made. And I was petrified. Petrified.
Yeah.
But I thought, I'm one of those people that if you have to be at work 8 hours a day, you might as well fake it till you make it and do it 100%, because you have to be there anyways. So that was my first opportunity. And very quickly, I realized that when it comes to sales, it's all about understanding people and connecting with them. And I knew even at a young age that I had lived so many experiences that 80-year-olds have experienced, So I had been poor, I've had money, I've been through it. So it was so cool to realize that my life had really led me to be able to relate and really see people for who they were, and in a non-judgmental way. And that made me very successful when it came to sales and building those relationships. So I was petrified, but very quickly I realized, this is all about just talking with people and getting to know them and their stories. So that was what was really cool about it.
That's awesome. So you're going from, an environment where you're learning something new, you're trying something new. And at what point do you start thinking, how do I start giving back?
Yes. So it actually took me a long time, because as you said, you can remove yourself from trauma. And that is a great way to try to start healing. But if you don't do the healing work and you just remove yourself, then that trauma is going to follow you. And that's really what happened to me. So I moved out. My career was amazing, but I fell into that trap of really not knowing what love was and how to define love, and picked a really, really bad partner. And so my life was just crazy at home and embarrassing at home and again. And so for me, finally, when I got that strength to say, you know what, I'm repeating this cycle and I can't do that. I can't do that. So I finally left that relationship, and that was when everything kind of took off. Not my career multiplied, my family life and my home life were wonderful. And that's whenever I started building the finances to even start thinking about other people. And when I moved to Pennsylvania, I worked with a development company on scholarships, in the same scholarships that I received as a child. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And that is when I realized I need to do this on my own, because no one knew. There was no other business out there that was really being run by someone that experienced those scholarships. And how powerful could you be if you were the one navigating and steering the ship, because you knew how they affected you. So that is what made me really take that leap of faith and start giving back through this company. And it's been such a wonderful experience and what we've been able to accomplish. And it really shows that those people that have been affected and have lived those experiences are the ones that should be involved in the decision making to change things. because they know what matters.
Right. So tell me about what the scholarship did for you.
Yeah, so I ended up I was really bullied and it's nothing against public school for other kids. Public school plays a great role and they do wonderful things for millions of students, but for me, it was not a great experience at all. And I was lucky enough to receive a scholarship to go to the private school in the other town. And whenever I did that, we're pretty poor at that time. And so I didn't like hang out with kids that had parents as doctors or that had a mom and dad that were together forever, or had that stable kind of life. And so for me, that scholarship, number one, it was a religious school. So I learned about God and higher power and really connected in that way of something that I've always felt at a young age. So that was really helpful to me. But then number two, just being exposed to other ways of life. I always say I'm very much like a sponge and I try to soak in as much that surrounds me. And so I took that opportunity and saw, all right, things can be different. I don't know how they're going to be, but they can be. So I didn't lose hope. And oftentimes I think that is one of the hardest reasons to break the cycle, because if you do not have hope and see a way to that opportunity or know that it is possible, then it is that mindset of like, there's no use in striving because I'm stuck.
Yeah. That resonates so much with me because I grew up in the inner city of York, Pennsylvania. And, nothing against York, but it wasn't the best environment. It wasn't the best environment, especially downtown. So I lived 2 blocks off of the square and we raised by a single mom, and most of the people that I knew only had one parent. So that was normal. Most of the people that I knew had, it was a pretty poor area. But my mom would drive me out to the suburbs to do cheerleading. So we had cheerleading in downtown York, of course, but she would drive me out to the suburbs to do cheerleading out there. And then she would send me away to summer camp in the woods, way far away, a couple hours from home. And so those experiences are what really opened my eyes to what else is out there. And so I really think it's exposure. It's all about exposure. I love that some of the schools now are doing trips to colleges in like middle school because they want them to see this is what the possibility is. Like there are options outside of your 6-block radius of your house. And so I think that exposure is so powerful and profound for a young person. So I can totally relate to that.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes, I say this so much about trauma. When that is your cycle and you have navigated it and you've grown up in it, when things aren't chaotic, it can be very uncomfortable and fill you with fear of like, wait, I don't know how to handle when life is like this. I don't know. And it makes people uncomfortable. And so much so that when they escape, right, they are like, they retreat back to where they're from and into that cycle because they don't know how to deal with it. And that was very much who I was. It took me like 26 years to actually realize like, oh my goodness, I've been getting these opportunities to get out. And then I need the chaos because that's what I've known. And I needed to stop all of that.
Yeah. Well, and then that applies to so many things. That applies to people in relationships who are in, who grew up with an abusive household and then they go into abusive marriages. And because that's the cycle that they know it's painful, they know it's awful, but that's what's comfortable to them. That is their comfort zone. And they feel like that's what love is, right? So that is what they attribute to love. Like, well, if I grew up with my mom and my dad, they're still together after 50 years, even though he beat her every single day. That's love. And same thing with jail. And I feel like that's why people can commit crimes over and over and over is they get out of jail, they go back to the environment they were in before jail, they have no additional skills, they have no additional way to make life for themselves. And then there are many times where when people are in jail for a long time, they become acclimated to that environment, and they'll recommit a crime to go back to jail because that is comfort to them. That's what they know. It's 3 meals a day, it's a bed, it's predictable. And so even though it's chaos and it's a bad environment, that's what people will retreat to, just innately, it's sad. It's hard to break cycles.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I lived so much of that where it was like, my family life was abusive. And so then I started a relationship that was abusive, and then I couldn't leave because that's what I know. And this is love. And it was so confusing. But the moment that I realized, because I have a defiant streak in me, the moment that I realized that I was allowing myself to become a statistic is the moment that I was like, I drew the line. But it was such a realization, and it was a police officer.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I had this very bad situation that happened with my ex-husbands. They had to come, and he pulled me aside and he handed me his card, and he said, "Sweetheart, I've been on many calls like this, and they don't end the way you think they're going to end. You need to go." And I did. I went to my sister's house, and thankfully, am not part of that. And I should have known that. That's the wild thing is it's almost like I needed to hear it from him in such a stern way. And he said it in a way that I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I was in danger. And I should have known that based on my life previously and watching my mom go through it. But it wasn't clicking. I just kept saying that, well, this is love. This is love. And it wasn't, So I needed that outside person. So for our company, one of the biggest things that I want to bring into our mission and who we are as a company is to be that outside person.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's what it takes, is an outside voice to show you that it's possible and that's what you can do. And it's okay to do it.
Yeah, that one outside person can make all the difference, right? And it doesn't matter if it's a police officer, like in your case. In my case, it was a guidance counselor in high school. In high school, I was always a good student, and I wanted to do well, but my mom worked all the time. I mean, she was a single mom, she was waitressing, she was working in a factory. So I mean, she was always it was paycheck to paycheck. And so I didn't really have a lot of adult influence in my life. And so he would take me aside and say, "Hey, there's this, business camp that a college is running over the summer. I'm going to sign you up for it. There's this mediation training, and I think you'd be good at that." And so he kept pulling me out of the environment I was in and showing me these opportunities. But it took him for me to say, wow, somebody sees potential in me, and I never saw it in myself, right? And it's that one person who takes you aside can make all the difference. In one sentence, it can change your life.
Yeah. And then you look back, and it's so interesting because when you're living it, sometimes you can't convince yourself that it is what it is, right? But then when you leave and you realize normal life, I look back and I think that is so scary that I allowed that, and that I couldn't see or remove myself. And it is mind-blowing whenever you are fully escaped from it and you look back and realize how bad it is. Because if someone was telling me that I was abused at that time, I would be like, no, I'm not. He just gets upset, right? Then once you've healed and go through therapy and all that stuff, you look at it and it's wild how your perspective and where you're standing, your vantage point can make you realize so much about the reality of the situations that you've been in.
Because you normalize it, right? Because that becomes your new normal. It happened to me. I was in an abusive marriage. My second marriage was very abusive. So it didn't start out like that. It never does, right? It never does. And so everybody's like, I'm so shocked, because I've always been a very strong woman. I've always been very outspoken. And so for somebody to come in and be abusive to me, you would think it would be a dogfight, right? But it happens slowly and it's very manipulative. And so, but I remember I had begged him to go to counseling multiple times, and he would always go, and he would always go 3 or 4 times. And then at the end, it would always, whenever the conversation turned to him, right? So it was the first couple sessions. My mom did this, my dad did this, my ex-wife did this, it's everybody else's fault. And then the moment the counselor would turn it on to him, he would quit. There was an excuse of why he had to quit. Yeah. And so I said, let's try couples counseling. Let's try couples counseling and we'll go together. And It was a very frustrating experience, but I think the counselor, because I would tell a story and he would say, that's not how it happened. And he'd tell a completely different version of the story. And I would just be thinking, what universe did that happen?
Mm-hmm. And then you question yourself, like you
yeah,
question,
yeah. You
because
start
that
thinking you're
happened to me.
crazy.
Yeah, you start really believing that like what you felt, what you saw, and what
Was
you
not valid.
experienced was not true. So
Mm-hmm.
then you're even scared to speak up and tell
Yep.
people
Mm-hmm.
because you have truly convinced yourself and or this person has convinced you to believe that you can't trust what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. And that is true manipulation and it is so
Mm-hmm.
powerful. And I wish that more people understood because I'm the same way, Angela. I'm a strong woman, and if
Mm-hmm.
anyone in my family, they just couldn't believe like these things were
Right.
happening, you know, to
Right.
me of all people, because I would be the first one to like walk away from someone that was rude to me. Like, I don't
Right.
have time for you, you
Exactly.
know. But
Yeah.
so it is really difficult, and I hate to see sometimes where we like victim blame of like, oh, you should have just left earlier. But no, it
No, it's
really,
not
it's
like that.
psychological. It
Mm-hmm.
really is.
Well, and a good narcissist is going to make everybody around him love him, right? And so it becomes unbelievable. If you try to tell the story, they're like, no, no, that's
Yes.
not possible, right? And they start questioning you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, but I remember we were sitting in the marriage counselor's office, and she said, you know what, I think let's just try individual counseling at first. She's like, because your stories are very different. I want to hear from each of you individually. And she sat with me. I remember the first time I went in there and I met with her individually. She said, Angela, she's like, I'm going to tell you two things. And she said, number one, do you see how when you're describing a story, it sounds normal to you if you're telling somebody else what's going on and they're sitting there with a shocked look on their face? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, it's because you've normalized this. You think this is normal. You think breaking a door down because you're not letting him in is normal. You think all the locks being broken in your house is normal. You think not, having your heart race when he pulls up in the driveway is normal. Like that has become your normal. That's not normal. She said, when other people are shocked when you're telling them something, it's because it's shocking. It's not
Yes.
normal. And she said
It's so it's so funny that you say that because I remember I was a branch manager and I was telling this story that I just thought was normal about my childhood. Like,
right.
yeah, it was a little like, you know, but it was normal. And I
Mm.
remember all of my employees looked at me and were like looking at each other and were like, are you serious? And they were
Right.
absolutely shocked. And they were like, my parents never did that, Alyse.
Right.
And I thought, and then I was embarrassed because I just truly did normalize so much, and I was just telling
Yes.
a story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and like you, I would think that, like, well, this is just the story. Like, this is just what happened. And then I would just talk about it in a normal tone of voice, like not crying, not upset.
Yeah.
And they're like, how can you be so calm and talk about this? And then the other thing that she said to me is, Angela, I know that you think it will change and this counseling will help him. And she said, and I am a Christian counselor and I never recommend divorce because I feel like there's always a way that you can make it work. And she said, but he will never let you leave this marriage intact. She said, he will destroy you physically, he will destroy you mentally. And she said, you need to pack a bag and leave today. And that's, I mean, it's powerful when somebody else sees it, but yeah, it sometimes takes that person stepping in to be that voice of reason for you because you're in it, like you were saying, like you're in it. And when you're in it, it's so hard to see it for what it is. And they say you can't see the forest for the trees or something, and it's true. Like you can't see it until you step out of it. And when you step out of it, you're like, oh my God, how did I survive that? Or how did I let that go so long? And then you have guilt, right? You have that guilt and anger of like, I let this go on, how did I let this happen so long? And how did I tolerate this? And so you deal
And
with
I always think like, 5 years of my life,
I know.
5 years.
Yep.
I let that go. I look back at that and I, honest to goodness, I don't even recognize that woman.
Yes, I
Or girl. Like I
agree.
don't and my heart hurts for her. And I don't remember being her.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Wow. Well, thank God that you're past that, and you've gotten the help that you need, and you've gotten that, you've really kind of spent some time working on yourself, because I think that's one of the most impactful things that you can do for your life, to turn it around and to break a cycle. So then you start looking at these scholarships and figuring out, how can I help other people? So how did that all come about? How did you put that together?
Yeah, so I started working with some scholarship organizations that ran these programs, and I realized that really there's not a lot of people out there that know how to navigate. It's a what's called the Educational Improvement Tax Credit Program. So you can, when donors give, they get a tax credit for giving, which is
Okay.
really cool. So the state basically incentivizes people to help these underprivileged students with their own dollars. And but it's a confusing process if you're not like a tax person, and it even confuses CPAs.
Right.
So I just really studied it. Again, went in with that kind of sponge mindset of like, I want to know as much as I can. And so then we created a pretty simple process to explain it to the everyday person on how they can redirect their tax dollars to these underprivileged students in their communities. And then we kind of handle that process for them. So they just have to sign a one-page form and then write the contribution, and we take care of everything else for them to make it nice and easy. Because we knew that people want to help, but they also don't have time. So if we can make it smooth, simple, and explain it pretty easy, that they would be willing to come together. And boy, did they ever. Like in our first year, we raised $8.5 million for students in Pennsylvania, which will affect about 10,000 students over the next 2 years. And that was our first year. And to date, from our company, we're probably sitting about $13 million in what we've raised since the inception of our company.
That's incredible. Good for you. Wow, that's so powerful. I love that story. So tell me now, how many kids are you sending to schools now that you have raised all this money, and how long have you been doing this?
Yeah, so the really cool thing is the dollars after 2 years will affect and help about 10,000 students
Wow.
attend and get out of their school that they're currently in, which is really great. And all of the dollars that we raise do go to underprivileged families. Like once you reach a certain income, those dollars don't go to you. They do go to families that cannot afford financial aid and can't afford to, if they're in a public school, like, and they know that they're really struggling. Well, that's great that there's other options, but if it's not financially obtainable for them, like they're stuck. So it only goes to those families that do need another option, but can't financially make it happen. So that is really cool to see. Not only is the first step of change is getting these students, but when you change the generational cycle by getting a child out of a system that's not working and giving them that opportunity to see the world outside of where they were, it can change not only for them, but their siblings, their mom, their dad, their children. And I always say, I wish I will be around to see the full scope of change that we've created in our company. But I really believe that the change will continue to go and will far outlive even myself.
Yeah.
Because it's cyclical.
Well, I love it. It's so beautiful that you're really creating a legacy, and not just for yourself, but for so many people. Because like I said, we were talking about it, it's exposure, it's exposure. It's knowing what's outside of your area. And that's one of the biggest troubling things with people who are in these cycles, is they just don't know, right? They just don't know. And until you have that exposure, and until you're out of that environment and you're seeing what's possible, and you're able to experience these things, and you have the support that you need, that's really powerful. So good for you. Wow, that's just so amazing.
Yeah, it feels good. I always say it reminds me of, someone had asked me, like, are you really going to start this company? And I said to him, I owe it to my younger self to do this. Because I think about that girl writing in my journal in 5th grade saying, there's beauty waiting for me if you just make it through.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to see, because I really feel like it's such a powerful, profound moment in my life whenever I realize I made it come true.
Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
not only did I make it come true for myself, but it's having an impact in our state.
Wow, that's amazing. So are you guys going outside of Pennsylvania now? Do you have plans to expand?
Yeah, so we're actually in Georgia already.
Awesome. Yay.
And so there are about a dozen states that have these tax credit programs, which is really cool. So we do plan to go into other states. We have just grown so much in Pennsylvania so fast. I mean, so fast. I couldn't have ever imagined. I knew we would be successful because I didn't give myself an option to fail, but I never imagined in my wildest dreams that we would grow as quickly as we have in this state. So we just don't want to outgrow our pace and fail.
Right.
So we're trying to be as strategic as possible. But yes, that is the plan. We're ramping up with employees right now. We actually had to move into a larger office space to fit all of the employees. So that is really exciting to kind of ramp up, get on solid ground so that we can be just as successful in all the other states that offer these credits as we are in Pennsylvania.
Wow. Well, good for you. That's amazing. And I'm in Georgia, so yay.
Yes,
That's
yes, that's
exciting.
awesome. Savannah is where we are, which is really cool. So we only picked up one school so far in Georgia, but it's been going really well. And what we've learned is once one domino kind of falls, they all start seeing the impact and they jump on board.
Very cool. So you work directly with the schools, or do you work with the donors, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we actually partner with the schools themselves.
Okay.
And then we are the ones that go out and find the donors for the schools.
Okay.
And all of those things, because at first, one of the biggest things that I hope people will take away from this is I was really confused on whether to do a nonprofit or a for-profit business. And because it wasn't about money, I've been poor, like it didn't matter to me. I just wanted to make my legacy. Like I wanted people to know that I left my mark on this world. And ultimately, I chose a for-profit company. The reason why I did that is because there's such a way that nonprofits are supposed to fit in this box. You're supposed to spend the least amount of money, and sometimes spending the least amount of money is not the best option to make the biggest impact. And then there's a board that tells you what to do. And I'm not really good with having people tell me the direction that I want to go because, again, the reason I started this is because I have experienced it and the other people on the board may not have. So we did a for-profit, but we keep the same model as a nonprofit. So everything that we get in above and beyond salaries, right? We are like reinvesting into our community, but it cut the red tape of having to wait for a board and all of those things.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And it's still a write-off for the people who are donating, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a write-off. And so basically, I'll give you a quick example. If someone owed $1,000 in Pennsylvania state taxes and they gave $1,000 to the scholarship organization for these students, all $1,000 that person gives would go to those students. But then they would also receive a credit on their taxes of $900. So it's like you get credit for paying $900 of your taxes, but meanwhile you gave $1,000 to these students. So it's a really cool program. It's one of those where you get 90 cents on every dollar that you give if you do it in the correct way. And we're giving anyways in our day-to-day life, and we're not getting anything back. So it's a pretty easy conversation when people grasp it. Again, it can be confusing, but the way that we do it, we try to simplify it so that people just understand when they give, they can get back as well.
Wow, that's powerful. And I definitely want to talk to you because we pay a lot of taxes and I'm always looking for charities. And one of the challenges I had this year is I wanted to donate to a charity that would help children and a charity that would help veterans. And but I didn't want to go with a big national organization because I know how little of the money typically goes to the actual people who need it. I wanted a smaller organization that I could donate to, but they're so hard to find
They
because,
are.
like they're underrepresented and they're not putting the money into the marketing that these big national organizations are doing. And then they become really, really, really difficult to find.
Yes.
And then they're not staffed well. So you're trying to get in touch with people and it takes them a week or two to respond. And, so I think what you're doing is so incredible. And, reaching out to corporations would be amazing, because if you're reaching out to corporations and like I'm paying, if I have to pay $12,000 to the state of Georgia, I would love to be able to just shoot that over to you and say, here, do something with this that's powerful and meaningful, versus me just handing it over. Not that I don't want to pay taxes. I don't want to tell people I don't want to pay taxes, but I would love to see it directly impact my community as well.
100%. And the really cool thing, and the way that the state of Pennsylvania is set up, is even if every single person in our community participated, right, and redirected their tax dollars, it's a separate line item in the budget. So your county and township, and like, there's not going to be less tax dollars for your public schools or anything like that. It's a separately funded part of the budget, which I love, because tax dollars are important where they flow to and the services. So we always try to make sure people understand that, because the last thing we want to do is handicap a public school.
Right.
Because
no,
they play such a big role in our communities. But we also have to understand the reality that public school doesn't fit every single child.
Right. Of course. Yeah, I think tailoring that, and allow people to put the money where they feel it's going to make the most impact. And whether that's, I know I went to a public school and my son goes to public school, but I know there's a vast difference in the public school I went to and the one that he is going to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always say it's like one of those situations where I had a wonderful teacher. Her name was Mrs. Spees when I went to public school.
Yeah.
And that woman is a godsend. And I always say, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Freedom Writers, but that is her as an English teacher. She's just amazing. So there are some life-changing, life-altering teachers in public schools that aren't in private. But again, overall, we just have to have some options for those ones that don't fit in that box.
Yeah, absolutely. And kids are all different, just like, their education should be. So, well, I'm so incredibly impressed with what you're doing. And I think you're really building an incredible legacy that's going to hopefully have a huge impact on breaking cycles of poverty. And I think that it takes people like you who really have experienced what you've experienced and say, no more. And it's time to make a difference, and it's time to step up. And good for you for using all of your pain for fuel and not numbing it like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. My legacy is something I think about all the time. So I hope to live up to what I want to leave behind.
Yeah, fantastic. So who inspires you?
Who inspires me? There's so many people that I draw inspiration from. Obviously the women in my family, to just watch them struggle and overcome and even out every single odd that was stacked against them, I think is a beautiful thing. Our next generation inspires me and gives me such hope in their willingness to look at social issues and want to be the change that they seek. I think they get a bad rap. Every youngest generation does from the older generation. All these kids, but no, I really do. They inspire me, and I think it's really the younger generation. And a shout out to all these women. I was at this in LA, Los Angeles, for this remarkable women's from Next to Our Media. 112 women from across the country were selected to go, and being in that room of another 112 remarkable women was so inspiring. It's these everyday women that get up without the recognition, without the applause, without the fanfare, and they continue to make the world a better place. And that to me is so inspiring.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And since I've started this podcast, I've met so many inspiring women, and I am just in awe of what they are accomplishing every single day. And with odds stacked against us, we still push through. So there's, was it hell hath no fury as a woman scorned? Like,
Thorns.
don't
Yeah.
don't piss me off, because
Yes.
I will
Yep.
change the world.
Yes, that's so true. That's my motto. I always say I had an old boss right before I started my job, my company, that upset me because he
Yeah.
treated me like I couldn't do it. And that was the worst decision
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
because it just fuels me to prove it wrong and to make it happen.
Wow, that's amazing. So that kind of leads me into a question. So as women, we give our power away all the time, and that looks different for everybody. So can you tell me about a time that you've given your power away, and then another time where you've stepped into your power and owned it?
Yeah, I going through I don't speak about this often, but obviously I was married before in that really bad relationship, and I had a child with him, and he's my buddy Connor. But when I left, I decided to be nice, and genuinely, he struggled with drugs, this guy, and I had a really good job, so I said, I won't divorce you so that you can keep the health insurance. Do you know what I mean? If you ever want to go, my insurance covered rehabilitation 100%, no cost. So I didn't ever want him to be without that option. So I gave up that power of just walking away and like stopping and moving on. And it turned out through the court system that was a really bad idea. Really bad idea, because then as I went on to live my life, and I was still technically married, even though I was genuinely doing it out of like good intentions, it was a bad thing to do. Don't ever do that. Just get divorced.
Really?
Just sign the papers. Yes. Do not leave the door open. Don't let it appear that you've left the door open if you truly are done, even if it's to the benefit of your child's father. So that is one, and it made custody and everything else very bad.
Really?
Very, very, very bad. Very bad. And the other time is genuinely, I think it's that story of I had kept having old clients say, Alyse, if you ever go out on your own, you need to call me, and I eventually, so many people had said that to me. I talked to my old boss about it, and I said, look, I have a school that really wants to hire me. They're not going to hire this company. We already know they said they will not partner with our current company, but they want to hire me. So I was trying to work something out that we could work together and I could take on this partnership, because there were many schools that didn't want to partner with him and his business, but they wanted to partner with just me. Right. And it was happening really often. So I didn't want to not help them. And he just would not partner with me in a way that was reasonable for what I was worth with the company. And that is stepping into my power and saying, you know what, you're going to regret this. Yeah. And I'm going to go on and I'm going to do this because I gave that opportunity to work together. And the old me would have just been like, oh, okay, sorry, school. Like, I'm just going to stay in this job because it's what I know. But I thought, no, I'm going to do this because I'm powerful enough to do it. I'm powerful enough to do it, and I have the strength to make it work. So I always suggest going into that fear of the unknown right before something beautiful happens. At least in my life, it has been proven over and over again that right before the beauty hits, it's really dark. Yeah. It gets a little bit more intense of darkness, and then it just opens up with the most beautiful scene that you can ever imagine in your life. So keep going and believe in yourself. And everyone doubts themselves, right? Everyone has those doubts, but don't let it deter you and let that fear pull you back into a situation that you're comfortable in just to be comfortable.
Yeah, I agree. Wow, that's awesome. Great advice. I love that you stepped into your power when you knew you believed in yourself, right? And that to me is one of the biggest ways we can step into our power. And you know, when you gave your power away to your ex-husband, that's such something that as women we do all the time. We think about the bigger picture, right? Like we are not selfish, and so we typically will think bigger picture, like this is my son's father, this is for the greater good, I'm going to sacrifice my ability to move on because this is what's best for the environment. And we do that too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Absolutely.
we have to be selfish, because being selfish is what allows us to grow and develop in certain moments. And I'm not saying always do for yourself, but that's when we give our power away the most, is when
Mm-hmm.
we think we're being helpful for the greater good.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Yeah, my 18-year-old self would be, listen to my heart. I was always in love with my first love. Okay.
Oh,
Like my
yeah.
whole life. I was with him when I was 15. He was 16, and I loved him like my whole life, and I always thought about him. And I just felt like, gosh, we were meant to get back together at some point in life. But then I was like, I don't want to bug him or ask him and take that rejection. So I'm just going to try to move on. And so the one thing I would say is, just because someone is your first love doesn't mean that you need to go out and like experience life, and you have to listen to society, and you should date other people just before you get married. Like I wish that, number one, because gosh, we missed a lot of time together. But number two, I think just be nicer to your mom.
Yeah, I know.
Be nicer to your mom, because gosh, I was miserable to her for many things, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, she did make mistakes, but now I have 3 children, and I make mistakes all the time, all the time. And some of the things that I felt were mistakes, and I was angry at her, I didn't recognize it until I had my third child. That it is easy to like feel overwhelmed, right? Like, so I had my first, and I was like, wow, how could my mom act the way that she did? I don't feel this, you know? And then my second, I was still like, everyone always said, when you have a child, your relationship with your mom will get better. And I was so upset because the first child, I didn't feel that. The second child, I didn't feel that. But that third, that third, and the chaos that comes with that really did change the way that I looked at her mistakes under a microscope. So yes, and when you're 18, be nicer to your mom, and understand that they do make mistakes, and some of them are absolutely awful, awful.
Right.
But they didn't do it to hurt you. It's because they've been through their own cyclical trauma, and they may or may not have healed, and they were probably just doing the best that they could to just survive, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so hard because we look back and we want to be so judgmental. We want to, you know, we want to think, I didn't do it that way, so why did she, or why did they, or but it's really hard. And you know, I learned at much too late in life to meet people where they are. You know, meet people where they are. Not everybody's in the same place as you, and we've got to give them grace. So
yes,
great.
Absolutely.
So I've really enjoyed this conversation. This has been super fun. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of what you're doing. I have one last question for you. What do you wish more people knew?
I wish more people knew that the thread that connects all of us is just the desire to be seen and understood. And I think that I wish more people took the time to really understand why someone acts the way that they do. And if you're with someone that's, you know, you're driving down the road and someone is just like beeping their horn and like flipping out, right? They might have had an absolutely terrible day, and you're probably seeing them at their worst moment, right? And everyone has them. Everyone has those awful moments. So I just, to your point, grace. Grace. I think just in this world today, everything seems so angry, and like, especially politics and all, like, it's just like everyone, we are all humans. And we all have feelings, and we all do want the best right, for ourselves and our families, let's go back to the thread that connects us.
Yeah.
And just listen to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Alyse. You have been amazing, and I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. You've given some really profound advice, and I think what you're doing to build a legacy and to break generational poverty is amazing. So good for you. Keep doing what you're doing. How can people find you online?
Yeah, so redefiningeducation.org is our website.
Okay.
So that gives you more information about our company as a whole. And if you have a student that really needs a hand up, that could use those financial tools, there is, you can actually apply for our Triumph Over Tragedy scholarship right there on the website. And then I use LinkedIn. That is like the one social media that I really, really utilize. So it is, Alyse Maslonik, in Redefine. So yeah, that LinkedIn is, I would love to connect with everyone and keep you posted on when my memoir is complete, because that's been such a moving, wonderful, crazy experience to do it. But I'm excited for when that comes out.
Yeah, I bet it's healing as well.
Yes.
So, well, thank you so much, Alyse Maslonik, for everything that you're doing and Redefined and the Triumph Over Tragedy scholarship. I think you guys are just doing amazing things. So thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you incredible success in all that you do.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And you can always check us out on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time. And until then, step into your own power.